Hey everyone, June is PTSD Awareness Month, so I wanted to make a set of really short videos to talk about what it's like to live with PTSD. Today I want to talk about what it was like for me to start therapy and what it was like for me to get a diagnosis of PTSD. I wanted to start out by thanking my therapist for all of the great work that he's done with me, because without him I wouldn't even be able to make a video like this at this point in time. And I also want to let people know that in this video, I'm going to be talking about what caused my PTSD. So I'm going to be talking about my trauma. I want you to be aware of that because I know some people are really sensitive to it. I will try and let you know before I talk about that so you can choose whether or not you want to continue to watch the video or whether or not you want to skip over part of it, or whether or not you want to watch the video at all. So I started therapy because I felt angry all the time, and I didn't understand why. And I was working at a really great job with some really amazing people, but I found that there was one person that I was working with who every time I worked with them, I felt really agitated and angry. And it got to a point where I couldn't work on projects with them or be in meetings with them or even just have them walk by my office without feeling furious. So I went to a therapist the first time to work on interpersonal effectiveness skills, which just means I was looking for a way to work better with my coworkers so that I could continue working at the job that I loved and continue doing the work that I enjoyed doing. So at my first visit, we did what's called an intake process, and that's just a fancy way of saying getting to know you. So during the intake process, the therapist asks you questions about your life and about what your goals are for therapy, what you're hoping to get out of it. You don't have to answer any questions that you don't want to. You can share as much or as little as you feel comfortable with. During my intake process, I talked a little bit about my family, about the fact that my mom and dad were both deceased. I have two siblings. I have one child. I'm divorced. I was in a secure job. I have really secure housing. Talked about the fact that my life overall seemed pretty good at that point in time. Did share with them the fact that my mom had struggled with depression for a large majority of her life and was hospitalized for it at one point in time. And because my dad was working in the military, he sent us to live with my grandmother. My sisters and I went to go live with my grandmother when I was about 5 years old. So over the next 2 weeks, we talked about my job and the things that my coworker was doing that brought up these feelings of anger for me. We talked about ways for me to work through those feelings of anger and how to work a little bit better with her. But by my fourth visit, I had told him that I had accepted another position and had given my 2 weeks notice at the job because I just couldn't work there anymore. So since my therapy goal of having a happier work environment had been met, we talked about the fact that I should come in one more time for some closure, which in therapy, they use a fancy term called termination. And so he told me I should come back in for one more termination appointment, and then I could come back and see him anytime if I really needed to in the future. So during that fifth appointment, we talked about a lot of stuff, but at the end of it, I asked him if I could keep my next appointment with him just in case. I was kind of feeling like maybe I wanted to come back and see him still. So I told him I would give 24 hours notice if I decided to cancel. And then we spent the next 11 weeks going through stuff that was coming up for me, like on a weekly basis, or things, that might have popped up during the week. He recommended for me things that I should read, like books or articles. And then when I came back, we would discuss those articles and what I had gotten out of them. I spent a lot of time complaining about his really uncomfortable furniture and his hideous art, which I guess is really not uncommon for people in therapy to do. It's a way of diverting what you're actually wanting to talk about by complaining about the therapist's office. So it's a diversion tactic. And so I did that. We talked about ways that I could practice self-care, which is something that I'm still really not good at. And at some point during my therapy, I started keeping a journal, and we talked about why I was so afraid to make mistakes in my own journal, that if I misspelled something or if my handwriting wasn't neat enough, I would rip out the entire page and rewrite it over again. We talked about the fact that I really had low self-esteem, and we talked about ways that I could communicate my needs better to other people. So by about my 15th visit, I had really started to trust him, and I knew that there were things in my life that I needed to talk to somebody about, but I didn't know how to talk to anybody about them. So because I was writing in my journal every day, some days I didn't have anything to write about. I didn't know what to write. And so I was looking for quotes on the internet, and I would use those quotes as prompts to help me write. And so I found a quote from Ernest Hemingway that said, all you have to do is write one sentence, write the truest sentence that you know. And so that's what I did. I filled the page with the most truthful sentences I could bear to write. And then I spent the next few days practicing and practicing reading it out loud until I thought that I could read it to him without throwing up, because I really thought that I was going to throw up when I read it to him. So the morning of my 16th visit, I got to the office and something went wrong, which was nobody's fault, but things didn't go quite the way that they were supposed to. And I was feeling pretty overwhelmed, and I knew that I couldn't read what I had written. And so what I actually ended up doing was handing him my journal and asking him to just read it to himself. And I guess it's not really uncommon either. So if you're seeing a therapist and there are things that you want to say but you don't know how to say them, I encourage you to write them down and just give it to them. That's nothing unusual for them. They're really used to that. But while he was reading it, I will tell you that I wanted to run away and I wanted to cry. I thought that I was going to throw up while he was reading it. It was really difficult for me. And so I want to share with you what I wrote in the journal. So this is the point where if you're sensitive, you may want to skip forward like a minute or two, because this is what I wrote in part. So I said I was physically, mentally, and sexually abused by my grandmother and my babysitter and my dentist, and an acquaintance broke into my home while I was asleep and raped me. On good days, I'm fine. On bad days, I sleep with a hoodie and sweatpants on over my pajamas because somehow it makes me feel safe. I don't go on dates or tell friends where I live because I'm afraid that every person I meet is going to hurt me. I really hate myself. I don't think anyone will ever love me. I get furiously angry with people and I don't know why. I blame myself for everything that goes wrong, even in situations where I know that it's out of my control. I'm afraid all the time. All the time. I always feel like I'm going to get in trouble even if I've done nothing wrong, and I feel like I could never do enough good to make up for all of the wrong things that I've done in my life. I'm so afraid to make mistakes that I often don't do anything at all. And I feel like everything I do is just wrong. And then the last sentence said, I don't want anyone else to ever know what I've written on this page. So when he finished reading all of that, he closed my journal and he looked at me and he said, I'm so sorry for what those monsters did to you. You did nothing to deserve all of that. He said, it's not your fault. And in that moment, I felt so validated and comforted, and it felt so amazing to know that somebody else finally knew the truth and that they weren't judging me for it or blaming me. And it was just really an amazing moment. And then later in our appointment, he told me that I have PTSD, and I remember feeling incredulous at that moment. I actually, in my mind, felt a little bit furious. I thought, I do not have PTSD. And I thought, oh my God, I just spilled my guts to this person and poured out all of my secrets to them, and he's a total crackpot. And I thought, what have I done? And we knew each other well enough by that point in time that I'm sure he read my mind, and he said, I want you to go home and do some research and read about PTSD. When you come back next time, we can talk about it a little bit more. And so that's what I did. I went home and I researched PTSD. And when I read the description of it, I was like, holy shit, I have PTSD. And while it was a little bit overwhelming at first to have a diagnosis of a mental disorder, it also has made me feel so much better to be able to look at myself and some of the things I do and really understand why I do them. I want to say that my PTSD is not an excuse for things that I do, but for me, a lot of times it is a reason, and having that reason can be a really powerful tool for me. Like if I'm in a situation where I start to feel really terrified and scared, I can check in with myself and I can ask myself, okay, is this actually a scary situation, or is this just part of my PTSD telling me that I should be afraid right now? And sometimes asking myself that makes me realize that what's going on isn't really scary at all. And it helps me to calm down and it helps me to feel okay. Um, I do spend a lot of times, I go through these periods of time where I will stand in front of the mirror and I'll look at myself and I'll just say, you're so ugly and you're so fat and you're a cow and nobody will ever love you. And now I have a tool where I can look at myself and I say, you know what? I say this is my trauma talking to me. This is the abuse talking to me, telling me these things, and it's not true. And so it's a tool that I can use to say, you know, your PTSD is lying to you. So for me, having the diagnosis is really important. So this is what I want you to know today about PTSD and therapy. Um, I want you to know that having a mental illness is nothing to be ashamed of, or having a disorder, because PTSD is a disorder, is nothing to be ashamed of. You don't deserve anything that's going on inside of your mind like that. There's nothing wrong at all with going to therapy, whether it's to work on some interpersonal skills like how to get along better with a coworker like I was doing, or whether it's longer therapy to work on bigger issues like trauma, or maybe other mental health issues that you have going on. I know I tend to be really open about my mental health and the fact that I see a therapist and the fact that I have PTSD. And I know that it makes some people really uncomfortable because there's still this huge stigma about seeing a therapist or a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Um, but I want to let you know that I am still the same me that I was before the diagnosis. And as a matter of fact, I might actually say that I'm a better person now than I was before, because I understand myself more and I've grown a lot and I've healed a lot from a lot of the stuff that happened to me. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Your brain might tell you that there are terrible secrets that you should never tell anybody else, or that you think things or do things that nobody else thinks or does. And I'm going to tell you that your brain is lying to you. No matter what's going on in your mind or what you've been through or what you're going through right now, there are people out there who can help you and won't judge you because you've done nothing wrong. And so I want you to reach out for help if you need it. And if you go to a therapist and you find that you don't like them for some reason, your personalities just don't mesh, find a different therapist. You have the right to do that, and find a person who really works for you. Again, because I wouldn't be able to make a video like this without my therapist and without the work that we've done together. And I'm going to tell you that you are totally worth it and you deserve really good mental health. So thank you guys so much for listening. Again, I really appreciate it. If you have questions specifically about PTSD or about my journey, please feel free to put them in the comments below and I'll try and answer any questions that you have. I really appreciate your love and support, and couldn't do this without you guys. So thank you so much.